A man at the park approached my twins and said, "I'm your real dad. These people bought you when you were babies." I was pushing Ella on the swing when the man walked up to us. He wore a faded denim jacket and had this desperate look in his eyes that made my stomach tighten. My son Lucas was on the slide, and I'd been watching both kids like I always did, hyper-aware of strangers in public spaces. The man stopped about 10 feet away, staring at my children with an intensity that made me step between him and the swing. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was already racing. He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on Ella and Lucas. "Those are my children," he said, and his voice cracked. "I've been looking for them for 6 years." My blood went cold. "Excuse me?" He took a step closer and I instinctively moved to block his path. "Ella and Lucas. Those are their names, right? Born October 12th, 2018. They have matching birthmarks on their right shoulders. Small, crescent-shaped. Am I right?" I couldn't breathe. How did this stranger know their names? How did he know about the birthmarks that my wife and I had noticed when they were infants? "You need to leave right now," I said, pulling out my phone. "Or I'm calling the police." The man's face twisted with anguish. "Call them, please. They need to know what happened. Your wife bought my children from a trafficking ring 6 years ago." The world tilted. Everything around me, the playground sounds, the other parents chatting on benches, the late afternoon sun filtering through the trees, seemed to fade into white noise. "What did you just say?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. The man pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket with shaking hands. "Missing persons report. Filed October 15th, 2018, 3 days after they were born. My wife, she was in a bad place after the birth. Postpartum psychosis. Someone took advantage, told her the babies died, but they didn't die. They were sold." I grabbed the paper, my hands trembling so badly I could barely read it, but there it was. 2 newborns reported missing from Mercy Hospital in Detroit. Names listed as Baby Boy Garrett and Baby Girl Garrett. Photos of what looked like standard hospital newborn pictures, and they looked like my children. They looked exactly like Lucas and Ella. "This is insane," I said, shoving the paper back at him. "My wife gave birth to them. I was there in the delivery room. I cut their umbilical cords. I held them first." The man's eyes filled with tears. "No, you weren't. Your wife told you that, but she wasn't pregnant. She faked the pregnancy and bought my children from someone at that hospital." "Daddy?" Ella's small voice cut through my panic. She'd stopped swinging and was looking at me with confused, frightened eyes. "Why is that man saying scary things?" I turned to her, forcing my voice to stay calm. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a confused person. Go play with your brother for a minute." But the man called out, "Ella, baby, it's me. It's your real daddy. Do you remember anything? Anything at all from when you were tiny?" Ella's face scrunched up. "I don't know you. You're scaring me." Lucas had come down from the slide and was standing next to his sister now, both of them looking small and vulnerable. My protective instincts went into overdrive. "You need to stop talking to my children right now," I said, stepping fully between them and this stranger. "I don't care what delusion you're operating under, but these are my kids. My wife gave birth to them." The man looked at me with something like pity. "Your wife's name is Jennifer, right? Jennifer Callahan before she married you?" My stomach dropped again because yes, that was her maiden name. "How do you know that?" "Because her name is on the hospital records. Not as a patient, as a visitor. She was there the day my children disappeared." Other parents were starting to notice the commotion now. A woman in yoga pants approached cautiously. "Is everything okay here?" I wanted to say yes, to send her away, to make this nightmare stop, but my mind was racing through 6 years of memories, trying to find proof that this man was lying, trying to remember details about Jennifer's pregnancy that would prove she'd actually carried the twins. And I couldn't. I'd been deployed overseas for most of her pregnancy. Navy assignment in Japan that kept me away for 8 months. Jennifer had sent me photos of her growing belly, updates about doctor appointments, ultrasound images, but I hadn't been there for any of it in person. I'd gotten emergency leave to fly home just in time for what she'd told me was early labor. I'd arrived at the hospital and she was already in delivery. I'd been ushered into the room, exhausted from travel, overwhelmed with excitement. And there they were, 2 perfect babies, my son and daughter. "You weren't there for the pregnancy," the man said, reading my face. "Were you? She told you about it from a distance. Sent you pictures, but you never felt them kick. Never went to an actual appointment with her." "Stop," I said, but my voice had no force behind it. The man pulled out his phone. "I have DNA results. From a lab. I found a cup Lucas threw away at this park 2 weeks ago. I've been watching you. I'm sorry, but I had to know. Had to be sure before I approached you." He turned the phone toward me, showing me an official-looking document from a genetic testing company. The results showed a 99.9% probability of paternal relationship between the DNA sample and Lucas Garrett. "This is fake," I said desperately. "You could have made this up." "Then test them yourself," the man said. "Take them to any lab. Test their DNA against yours and your wife's. See what comes back." The yoga pants woman had her phone out now. "I'm calling the police," she announced. "This is harassment." "Please do," the man said. "I want the police here. I've been trying to get them to investigate for 6 years. They said there wasn't enough evidence. But now I have DNA proof. Now I have witnesses who can confirm these are my children. I looked down at Ella and Lucas. They were holding hands now, both of them scared and confused. These were my children. I'd raised them from infancy. I'd been there for their first words, first steps, every milestone. The idea that they weren't mine, that Jennifer had somehow obtained them illegally, was impossible. But that nagging voice in the back of my mind kept asking questions. Why had Jennifer been so vague about the hospital stay? Why were there no photos of her actually pregnant? Only selfies that showed her midsection but never her face in the same frame? Why had she insisted on a home birth initially, only changing to a hospital at the last minute? Why had I never met her obstetrician? The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, one older and grizzled, one younger, and looking like this was more excitement than he wanted on a random Saturday afternoon. The man, who introduced himself as Cole Garrett, immediately started explaining his story. He showed them the missing persons report, the DNA results, everything. The older officer, whose name tag read Sergeant Driscoll, listened with a neutral expression. Then he turned to me. "Sir, are these your children?" "Yes," I said firmly. "My wife gave birth to them 6 years ago. This man is delusional." Driscoll nodded slowly. "And you were present for the birth?" I hesitated. "I was present in the delivery room. I'd just gotten back from deployment. But yes, I was there when they were born." "And you witnessed your wife being pregnant beforehand?" That hesitation again. "I was overseas, but she sent me updates, photos, videos of ultrasounds." Driscoll exchanged a glance with his partner. "Sir, I'm going to need you to bring your family down to the station. We need to sort this out properly." "Am I being arrested?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "No, sir. But we have a man here with a missing persons report that matches the description and ages of your children. We have DNA evidence that suggests a connection. We need to investigate this thoroughly." Cole Garrett was crying now, openly weeping as he looked at Ella and Lucas. I never stopped looking. Their mother, she couldn't handle it. The guilt destroyed her. She took her own life 3 years ago, but I promised her I'd find them. I promised. The younger officer was trying to comfort him while Driscoll focused on me. "Where is your wife right now?" he asked. Jennifer was at home. Saturday was her day to catch up on work, and I'd taken the kids to the park to give her space. "At our house," I said. "She's working from home. We're going to need to speak with her as well. Can you call her and ask her to meet us at the station?" I pulled out my phone with numb fingers and dialed Jennifer's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried. Again. Same result. A 3rd time. Nothing. "She's not answering," I said, and the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Driscoll's expression shifted slightly. "We'll send a unit to your house. What's the address?" I gave it to them, watching as Driscoll radioed it in. Everything was moving too fast. An hour ago, I'd been having a normal day at the park with my kids. Now police were involved, a stranger was claiming to be their biological father, and my wife wasn't answering her phone. The younger officer, whose name tag read Officer Lynn, knelt down to talk to Ella and Lucas. "Hey there, kids. I'm Officer Lynn. We're just going to go for a ride to the police station, okay? Nothing scary. We just need to ask your dad some questions." Lucas looked at me with wide eyes. "Are you in trouble, Daddy?" "No, buddy," I said, my voice breaking. "Everything's going to be okay." But I didn't know if that was true. We were driven to the station in separate vehicles. Cole Garrett rode with Driscoll while Lynn drove me and the kids. The whole way there, I kept trying Jennifer's phone. It kept going to voicemail. At the station, they put us in a family room with toys and coloring books. A child services worker came in to sit with Ella and Lucas while I was taken to an interview room. Detective Rachel Moreno introduced herself. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. "Mr. Dalton, I need you to walk me through everything, from the beginning. How you met your wife, her pregnancy, the birth, all of it." I explained meeting Jennifer 7 years ago at a friend's wedding. We'd hit it off immediately, dated for 6 months, got engaged. I'd proposed right before my deployment to Japan. She'd told me she was pregnant 2 months into my deployment. I'd been overjoyed, if sad that I'd miss most of the pregnancy. She'd kept me updated with photos and videos, her belly growing, ultrasound images showing 2 babies. She'd told me about doctor appointments, about how she was feeling, about picking out names. I'd believed all of it because why wouldn't I? When she told me she was going into early labor at 36 weeks, I'd gotten emergency leave. I'd flown back, gone straight to the hospital. She'd already been admitted. The nurses had told me she was fully dilated, that the babies were coming soon. I'd scrubbed in, gone into the delivery room, and there she was, in the hospital bed, looking exhausted and beautiful, and then the babies had come. "Did you see them actually emerge?" Detective Moreno asked. I paused. The doctor was blocking my view, but I heard them cry, and then the nurses cleaned them up and handed them to me. "Did you see your wife's body? Was she visibly postpartum?" Another pause. I tried to remember. Jennifer had been covered in blankets and hospital gown. I'd been so focused on the babies. "I don't remember," I admitted. Everything was so overwhelming. Detective Moreno pulled out a folder. "Mr. Dalton, we pulled hospital records from Mercy Hospital. There's no record of your wife being admitted as a patient on October 12th, 2018. There's no record of her being pregnant or giving birth." My mouth went dry. "That's impossible. I was there. I saw everything. You saw what appeared to be a birth, But according to these records, your wife was never actually a patient. However, she was recorded as a visitor that day, visiting the maternity ward. The room started spinning. No, there has to be a mistake. Detective Moreno slid a photograph across the table. This is from the hospital security footage from that day. Do you recognize this woman? The photo showed Jennifer in the hospital hallway, wearing regular clothes, not a hospital gown. She was talking to someone in scrubs. The timestamp showed it was hours before I'd arrived. I don't understand, I whispered. Mr. Dalton, we believe your wife may have staged the entire birth, that she arranged with someone at the hospital, possibly a staff member, to make it appear that she was giving birth, while in reality, she was taking custody of Cole Garrett's newborn twins, who had been reported as deceased to their biological parents. The words weren't making sense. Jennifer was my wife, the mother of my children. She wouldn't do something like this. She couldn't. Cole Garrett's wife, Melissa, suffered severe postpartum psychosis after giving birth to twins, Detective Moreno continued. She was hospitalized in the psychiatric ward. According to Cole's statement, a hospital social worker told him the babies had died due to complications. He was shown 2 small bodies. He and his wife were too devastated and confused to ask questions. They accepted it. But the babies didn't die, I said numbly. No, we believe they were very much alive, and we believe someone at that hospital facilitated an illegal adoption or sale. Your wife has significant financial resources, correct? I nodded slowly. Jennifer had inherited money from her grandmother. She'd told me it was around $200,000. More than enough to pay for illegal adoption if someone was willing to arrange it. We've been investigating several cases of suspicious infant deaths at Mercy Hospital during that time period, Detective Moreno said. There was a nurse, Diana Foster, who was fired 6 months after your children were born. She'd been caught falsifying records. We think she might have been involved in an adoption scheme, telling desperate parents their babies died, then selling those babies to wealthy couples who wanted children. I felt like I was going to be sick. Where is this nurse now? That's what we're trying to find out. She disappeared after being fired. No one has been able to locate her. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. I looked at Detective Moreno. Can I check this? She nodded. I opened the message and my blood turned to ice. It was from Jennifer. I'm sorry. I love you. I love the kids. But I can't go to prison. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Tell Ella and Lucas I love them more than anything. There was a photo attached. Jennifer's car parked near a cliff overlooking the ocean, a location about 2 hours from our house. Detective Moreno grabbed my phone and immediately called it in. We need units to this location now. Possible suicide in progress. The next 3 hours were a blur of activity. Police were dispatched to the cliff location. I was held at the station while they searched our house, and Jennifer's car was found abandoned at the cliff. No body was recovered from the water below, but her purse and phone were left on the driver's seat along with a handwritten note. Detective Moreno showed me the note later. Jennifer had written everything. How she'd been desperate for children after multiple miscarriages. How she'd heard about Diana Foster through a private fertility forum online where women shared desperate solutions. How she'd paid Diana $200,000 to arrange for healthy newborn twins. How Diana had selected the Garretts because Melissa was vulnerable, hospitalized with psychosis, and Cole was overwhelmed and would accept whatever he was told. How Diana had faked the death certificates, shown Cole infant bodies that weren't his children, and handed the very alive babies to Jennifer. How Jennifer had staged the entire hospital birth scene, paying off a doctor and nurses to play along, making it look real enough to fool me when I arrived exhausted from international travel. She said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore, Detective Moreno explained. That seeing Cole at the park, seeing him finally figure out where his children were, made her realize it was over. She wrote that prison would destroy her and she couldn't face it. I sat in that interview room feeling like my entire life had been a lie. The woman I'd married, the mother I'd watched raise our children with such love and devotion, had stolen those children from their real parents, had let a father believe his babies were dead for 6 years, had let a mother die never knowing her children were alive. What happens now? I asked, my voice hollow. Cole Garrett will need to undergo DNA testing with both children to confirm paternity. Given the evidence we have, I believe it will confirm what he's claimed. At that point, custody will revert to him as the biological and legal parent. And me? Detective Moreno's expression softened slightly. You're a victim here too, Mr. Dalton. You had no knowledge of any of this, but legally you have no claim to the children. The adoption was fraudulent. Any paperwork Jennifer filed was based on false information. I thought about Ella and Lucas in the other room, playing with toys, not understanding that their entire world was about to explode, that the mother they loved was a criminal who'd abandoned them, that the father they knew was about to lose them forever. Can I see them? Before? Yes. You'll have supervised visitation during the transition period. We'll make this as gentle as possible for the children. But there was no gentle way to destroy a child's life. Over the next few days, the DNA results came back. Cole Garrett was definitively the biological father of both Ella and Lucas. His wife Melissa had been their biological mother before her death. The results were ironclad. I had to tell the twins. Sitting in a counseling room with a child psychologist present, I tried to explain in 6-year-old terms that their mommy had made a very big mistake a long time ago, that there was another daddy who had been looking for them since they were babies, that they were going to go live with him. Ella cried and clung to me. I don't want a different daddy. I want you. Lucas was quieter, more confused. Where's Mommy? He asked. Is she in trouble? Mommy went away, I said, which was the only truth I could give them. The official story was that Jennifer had fled. No body had been recovered from the water, and there were some investigators who thought she might have staged the suicide to buy time to run. But I'd seen her text message. I'd read her note. I believed she was gone. Cole Garrett was given immediate custody after a brief court hearing. I was granted visitation rights while the transition occurred, but everyone knew this was temporary. These were his children legally and biologically. I had no claim beyond having been their father for 6 years. The first time I dropped them off at Cole's apartment, I physically ached. He lived in a small 2-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood. He'd set up the second bedroom with 2 twin beds, decorated in an attempt at childlike cheerfulness, but it was clear he didn't really know what kids liked. He'd bought generic cartoon bedding and stuffed animals that were slightly off-brand. Ella and Lucas clung to me at the door. Do we have to stay here? Ella whispered. Cole stood in the doorway looking both hopeful and terrified. Hi, Ella. Hi, Lucas. I'm so happy you're here. I have juice boxes and we can watch movies. Whatever you want. But they were 6. They didn't understand biological parents versus the only father they'd ever known. They just knew they were being taken from me and given to a stranger. Over the next month, the visitations became longer. A few hours became overnight stays. Overnight became weekends. Throughout it all, I tried to help them adjust while simultaneously falling apart inside. My house felt empty without them. Their rooms sat untouched, toys scattered where they'd left them the last time they'd been home. Jennifer's things were still there too. Police had searched the house and taken some items as evidence, but most of her belongings remained because legally I was her next of kin unless a body was found. I went through her office one night, desperate for answers, or maybe just desperate to understand how I'd been so blind. I found files she'd hidden, correspondence with Diana Foster dating back 7 years, emails discussing alternative family building options for women who couldn't conceive. Diana had presented herself as a miracle worker, claiming she could provide healthy newborns to couples who had the resources and the determination. Jennifer had paid in installments, $50,000 up front, the rest upon delivery. There were other names in the files, other couples Diana had apparently worked with. I turned everything over to Detective Moreno, who said it was part of an ongoing investigation into an infant trafficking ring that had operated out of 3 hospitals in the region between 2016 and 2019. Diana Foster was wanted for multiple counts of fraud, kidnapping, and falsifying records. But like Jennifer, she'd disappeared completely. Some people just vanished when their crimes caught up to them. The family court judge granted Cole full custody after 3 months. My visitation rights were reduced to once a month supervised visits, then once every 2 months, then stopped entirely when Cole moved out of state. He'd gotten a better job offer in Colorado and wanted to start fresh with his children somewhere Jennifer and I and this whole nightmare couldn't touch them. I couldn't argue. Legally, I had no standing. The last time I saw Ella and Lucas was at a neutral location, a family services office with a social worker present. They'd been living with Cole for 4 months by then. They looked different. Haircuts I hadn't approved, clothes I hadn't bought. They were polite but distant when they hugged me goodbye. Will we see you again? Lucas asked. I couldn't answer honestly, so I said, I'll always love you both, no matter what. Remember that. After they left with Cole, I sat in my car and cried harder than I had since I was a child. These were my kids. I'd been there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every milestone. And now they were gone. My lawyer had told me there was nothing more I could do. The adoption had been fraudulent. I had no biological connection. Colorado law wouldn't recognize any paternal rights I might try to claim. I was a victim of Jennifer's crime, but the greater victims were Cole and his deceased wife, and the children themselves. I had to let them go. Work was my only distraction. I threw myself into my job at the civil engineering firm, taking extra projects, working late every night because going home to an empty house was unbearable. My family tried to help. My sister called daily. My parents wanted me to move closer to them in Florida, but I was paralyzed. 6 months after the twins left, Detective Moreno called me. We found Jennifer. My heart stopped. Alive? No. Her body washed up on a beach about 100 miles north of where her car was found. Dental records confirmed identity. She'd been in the water for months, so it wasn't staged. She'd really done it. Jumped off that cliff because she couldn't face the consequences of her actions. I didn't go to the funeral. Her parents held a small service, but they blamed me somehow, as if I should have known what she was doing, should have stopped her. Maybe they were right. Maybe there were signs I'd missed. But I'd trusted her completely, and that trust had been weaponized against innocent children. A year after everything fell apart, I got a letter. It was from Cole. He'd written to tell me that Ella and Lucas were doing well. They were in therapy, working through the trauma of losing the only parents they'd known. They asked about me sometimes, he wrote, but he'd been honest with them about what had happened in age-appropriate terms. They knew their first mommy had made a bad choice and that their first daddy hadn't known it was bad. He wanted me to know they didn't blame me, that they remembered me with love. He'd included a photo, Ella and Lucas on bicycles, wearing helmets, grinning at the camera. They looked happy, healthy, like they were healing. I put the photo on my fridge where it stayed for years. I never responded to Cole's letter because what could I say? Thank you for taking my children? I'm glad they're adjusting to their real life? The words didn't exist. I dated occasionally, but never seriously. How do you explain to someone that you raised children for 6 years before discovering they were kidnapped? How do you trust anyone after being deceived so thoroughly by the person you loved most? I started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped trafficking victims. It felt like penance, like maybe I could do some good with the horror I'd experienced. I testified at a congressional hearing about adoption fraud and the need for better oversight. Diana Foster was never found, but 3 of her accomplices were arrested and prosecuted. The investigation revealed at least 12 babies had been trafficked through the ring she operated. Some of those children were reunited with their biological families. Others had been adopted internationally and couldn't be traced. The registry I helped establish connected searching parents with children they'd lost, using DNA databases and investigative genealogy. It gave some families closure. 5 years after that day at the park, I got another letter. This one was in childlike handwriting. Dear Nathan, my dad said I could write to you. I'm 11 now. I remember you. I remember you reading me stories and pushing me on the swing. I remember feeling safe with you. Dad says what happened wasn't your fault. He says sometimes adults make bad choices that hurt kids, but you didn't make those choices. My therapist says it's okay to miss you and love Dad at the same time. She says people can have different kinds of parents, and it doesn't make the love less real. I don't understand everything that happened, but I wanted you to know I don't hate you. And sometimes I wish I could see you again, but I also love Dad, and my life here is good. It's confusing. Maybe that's okay. Love, Ella. I read that letter 50 times, cried over it, treasured it, and eventually responded, keeping my words simple and honest. I told Ella I loved her and always would, that I was proud of her for being so brave and strong, that she didn't have to choose between loving me and loving Cole, that the heart was big enough for all kinds of love, that I hoped she had a wonderful life full of joy and adventure. I didn't hear back after that, and I didn't expect to. Cole was raising her now. I was a ghost from a traumatic past, but knowing she remembered me, knowing she'd wanted to reach out, that was enough. 10 years after that day at the park, I was getting coffee when I saw them. Ella and Lucas, now 16 years old, sitting at a table with Cole. They were taller, so grown up I barely recognized them, but Ella had the same smile. Lucas still had that thoughtful, quiet expression. I froze, turned to leave before they saw me, but Cole noticed. He stood up, said something to the twins, and walked over to me. Nathan, he said, I thought that was you. We shook hands awkwardly. I didn't mean to intrude, I said. You're not. Listen, we're in town visiting colleges. Ella wants to look at the engineering program here. You have a minute? I didn't know what to say. Cole called the twins over. They approached cautiously, politely. Like I was a distant relative they vaguely remembered from childhood. You remember Nathan? Cole said to them. Ella nodded. Hi, it's been a long time. It has, I managed. You've both grown so much. Lucas studied me with those thoughtful eyes. Dad told us everything. About what our mom did. About how you didn't know. I didn't, I said quietly. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that. Ella's eyes filled with tears. Can I hug you? Is that weird? I couldn't speak, so I just opened my arms. She stepped into them, and it felt like the missing piece of my soul clicking back into place for just a moment. When she pulled back, Lucas hugged me too. Brief and awkward, but real. We turned out okay, Ella said, wiping her eyes. Dad's amazing. He worked really hard to make us feel safe and loved. And we're lucky we got to have that time with you too, even if it was complicated. Cole smiled sadly. I spent a long time being angry. At Jennifer, at the situation, at how much of my kids' early years I missed. But at some point, I realized you gave them something during those 6 years. You were a good father to them when they needed one. That doesn't make what Jennifer did right, but it doesn't make your love for them wrong either. I didn't know what to say to that. Thank you, I finally managed. We talked for 20 minutes. The twins told me about school, their interests, their plans. Ella wanted to study engineering like me. Lucas was interested in social work, inspired by the people who'd helped them through their trauma. They were remarkable kids, resilient and thoughtful, despite everything they'd been through. When we parted ways, Cole shook my hand again. If you're ever in Colorado, look us up. I mean that. You were part of their story. That doesn't just disappear. I watched them leave. This family that had been mine and wasn't, that had been destroyed and rebuilt into something different, but whole. That night, I went through the boxes I'd kept from when the twins were young. Photos I'd taken, drawings they'd made, report cards from their first year of school. I'd been planning to give these to them someday, but had never found the right time. I spent the weekend scanning everything, creating a digital archive. Then I sent it to Cole with a simple message, their early years, in case they ever want to remember. He responded immediately, thank you. This means more than you know. They have so few photos from before. This is a gift. 2 years later, I got a wedding invitation. Ella was getting married young, at 19, to her college sweetheart. She'd included a personal note. Nathan, I know this might be awkward, but you were my dad for the first 6 years of my life. That matters to me. I'd like you to be there if you're comfortable. I wasn't comfortable. It would be painful. But I went anyway. The wedding was small, held in a garden in Colorado. I sat in the back, not wanting to intrude on Cole's role as father of the bride. But during the reception, Ella found me. I have something to ask you, she said nervously. Dad walked me down the aisle. That was right. He's been my father through everything. But there's a father-daughter dance coming up. She paused, tears in her eyes. Would you dance with me too? Just for one song? I know it's a lot to ask, but you were there for my first steps. I want you there for this. I couldn't refuse, even though it broke my heart open all over again. Cole came over while I was trying to compose myself. It was her idea, he said, and I support it. You earned a place in her life, Nathan. What Jennifer did doesn't erase the father you were to them. So I danced with Ella while everyone watched, and I cried the whole time, not from sadness exactly, but from the strange, bittersweet beauty of it. This girl I'd raised for 6 years, who'd been taken from me through no fault of my own, who'd grown up with her real father and thrived, still wanted me to be part of her joy. After the dance, Cole approached me. There's something I need to say, something I should have said years ago. Thank you for loving them when I couldn't, for keeping them safe during those years. I hate how it happened, hate what Jennifer did, but I can't hate the result of them having a father who cared. We shook hands, and I finally felt something like peace. Lucas graduated college 2 years after Ella's wedding. I was invited to that too. I watched from the audience as he accepted his degree in social work, planning to help other children affected by trafficking and adoption fraud. After the ceremony, he found me. I'm starting a Sati non-profit, he said, helping families navigate legal and emotional issues when adoption fraud is discovered. I want you on the advisory board. You've lived this. You understand both sides. I joined his board, started speaking at conferences about my experience, helped other men who discovered the children they'd raised weren't legally theirs. There were more of us than anyone wanted to admit. Men who'd been deceived by partners, who'd loved children completely, only to lose them when the truth came out. My story became part of a larger conversation about adoption reform, about the need for better oversight, about how to handle cases where innocent people were caught in criminal schemes. Through it all, I maintained a relationship with Ella and Lucas. Not as their father, Cole was their father, but as someone who loved them and had been part of their story. Birthdays, holidays, major life events, I was invited to some of them. Never as a parent, but as family in a more complicated sense. When Ella had her first child, a daughter she named Melissa, after the grandmother who died never knowing her grandchildren had survived, she asked me to be there at the hospital. You should have been there when I was born, she said, holding her newborn daughter. Jennifer stole that from you, but you can be here now. You can meet your granddaughter. I held tiny Melissa, this continuation of a family line that had been broken and reformed so many times, and felt the weight of everything that had happened. Cole stood beside me, looking at his granddaughter with such love. She's beautiful, he said to Ella. Then he looked at me. Thank you for being here, for staying in their lives even when it hurt. Thank you for letting me, I said back, because he could have cut me out completely, could have insisted that I was part of the trauma, that my presence only reminded them of Jennifer's crime. But he'd been bigger than that, had recognized that love wasn't a zero-sum game, that the twins could have space for both of us in their hearts. Years passed. I remarried eventually, to a woman named Claire who knew everything and loved me anyway. We didn't have children, couldn't, but she understood that I'd already been a father once and lost it. She came with me to Ella's events, to Lucas's non-profit galas, to the family gatherings where I was welcomed as an honorary uncle figure. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I'd held newborn Ella and Lucas 25 years ago, but it was a life. Complicated, painful, beautiful, real. Jennifer's crime had stolen years from everyone. From Cole, who'd missed his children's early childhood. From Melissa, who'd died believing her babies were dead. From the twins, who'd lost their first 6 years and had to rebuild their identities. From me, who'd loved children who weren't mine, and then had to watch them leave. But somewhere in the wreckage, we'd found something like redemption. Not perfect healing, that wasn't possible, but acknowledgement that multiple truths could exist simultaneously. That I had been their father and Cole was their father. That Jennifer's crime was unforgivable and the love we'd all felt was real. That loss and love could coexist in the same space. On Lucas's 30th birthday, he gave a speech at his nonprofit's annual dinner. He talked about his journey, about being stolen as an infant, about growing up not knowing his real history, about the day at the park when everything changed. I lost my first father that day, he said, and I felt the familiar ache in my chest. But I gained my real father. And eventually, I learned that both things could be true. That Nathan Dalton gave me a foundation of love that carried me through the trauma of transition. That Cole Garrett fought for 6 years to find me and never gave up. That I'm the person I am today because of both of them and because of the mother I never got to meet, and even in some strange way because of Jennifer, whose terrible crime set all of this in motion. He looked directly at me in the audience. Love isn't limited by biology or law. It's measured by showing up, by choosing to care even when it's hard, by staying present through the pain. Nathan showed up for us first. Dad showed up for us when it mattered most, and they both kept showing up, for us and for each other. After the speech, Cole found me in the crowd. We were both in our 50s now, gray at the temples, tired in ways that went beyond physical. "My son is wise," he said. "Your son," I corrected gently. He smiled. "Our son, in the ways that matter." And maybe that was the truest thing anyone had said through all of this. Not the legal definitions or the biological facts, but the simple truth that love had made us all family. However imperfect and complicated that family looked, Jennifer's crime had tried to destroy lives. Instead, it had somehow created connections that shouldn't have existed, but did. I would never forgive what she'd done, the pain she'd caused, the years she'd stolen from all of us, but I'd found a way to live with it, to transform that pain into something that helped others, to maintain relationships with the children I'd loved, even though they'd never legally been mine. 25 years after that day at the park, I could finally say I'd found peace. Not happiness exactly. That was too simple a word for something this complex. But peace with the reality that life rarely follows the script we imagine, that families form in unexpected ways, and that sometimes the people who hurt us and the people who save us are impossible to separate cleanly. Cole and I attended Ella's daughter Melissa's kindergarten graduation together. Two grandfathers, neither of us related by blood to this child, both of us essential to her family story. After the ceremony, little Melissa ran up to both of us. "Grandpa Cole, Grandpa Nathan, did you see me? I got a certificate." We both knelt down to hug her, this innocent child, who'd been spared the trauma that had defined her mother's early years, who would grow up knowing she was loved by an extended family that looked nothing like the traditional model but worked anyway. "We saw you, sweetheart," Cole said. "We're so proud." And in that moment, watching this child who existed because of tragedy and trauma and love that refused to die, I finally understood that Jennifer's crime hadn't won. It had tried to destroy families, but instead, it had forced us to redefine what family meant, to expand it beyond blood and law into something that could hold multiple truths, multiple fathers, multiple types of love. The stranger at the park had been right 25 years ago. Those had been his children. But he'd been wrong, too, because they'd also been mine, in the ways that mattered most. And somehow, impossibly, we'd all learn to live with that truth. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.